Welcome to the Rider's Edge podcast, a platform to share conversations about the health and wellness of horse and rider. I'm your host, Farley Schweigert. Hey y'all, it's Farley with Rider's Edge, and today I want to talk about knee pain in riders. So one of the major reasons I want to talk about this today is that I have been having some knee pain myself. And as I've ridden more than what is normal for my schedule these past few months, my knees have gotten kind of cranky. And as I have Superman syndrome with the best of them, I come in from the barn at night and I'm like, what? I'm not old enough to have knee pain. What is going on? This can't be happening to Farls. Can't be. But it is. So we're going to talk about it. So the knee is a very simple joint. It basically does two motions. It bends and it straightens. The knee is the middle child of the lower limb. And so, often with middle children, they don't ever speak up until something is really bad wrong. And that happens with the knee a lot. The knee has four main ligaments that oppose the four major motions that happen upon it. It has an ACL, a PCL, an MCL, and an LCL. So if you follow sports at all, you commonly know about the ACL and the MCL. And those are typically the most injured of the ligaments of the knee. But the other two can be damaged or injured as well. The knee, it's for it to be a simple joint, it can have crunchiness that happen in it. The 5-cent medical word for that is crepitus. You can have a lot of crepitus going on to where you can hear it or you can feel it or both. And so it just feels crunchy. I have clients tell me I have crunchy knees, or I have loud knees, or I have Rice Krispie knees. They snap, crackle, pop. There's your joke for the day. So, your knee has a thick joint capsule around it as well, and the knee can have pockets of swelling. You can have intercapsular swelling and never, and your knee can feel tight. It can feel painful too, but typically if you have like intercapsular swelling, it just kind of feels tight, or there's maybe some pressure through that joint. And not necessarily will you be able to palpate or feel that swelling if it's just there. So you can have it there, and you can also have it come out from the joint. It even has pockets of swelling that you can feel. A lot of times you get some puffiness on the inside of your patella of your kneecap and lower, so kind of anteromedial, if we're going to use a 5-cent medical word today, in kind of the lower aspect of that area. But it can swell anywhere through that knee, as you probably will know, whether you've hit a barrel or not in your career. You can have just little pockets of swelling that pop up that you can feel. And we don't have to live with bad knees. We can do some things about it. We can change some things, and chronic knee issues can be slowed or even halted by knowledge and a little bit of action every day. When we think about riding happens with a flexed knee. Your knee is bent, and depending upon the length of your stirrups, it can be bent more or less. You'll often hear older cowboys talk about lengthening their stirrups and it's more comfortable for them to ride than maybe when they were younger. Um, and you often will hear about some people who have quote unquote bad knees. You'll see posts on Facebook and hear talk about them changing their stirrups. I know people who have knee trouble that really like riding in the wooden stirrups and nettle stirrups. I like riding in them on my barrel horses, and we'll probably eventually add them on my rope saddle, but I'm in a pretty standard roper stirrup right now on my rope saddle. Um, so, there's some different things. I've had people say that, the slanted stirrups really help with their knee pain, different things like that. It just changes some angles slightly. It's a slight change. Gosh, everything we talk about on here often is not the smoking gun. It's just a small piece of the puzzle. And, the more you know, the more puzzle pieces you have to juggle sometimes, which, can often be a good thing because more knowledge is power. But I don't know about you, but gosh, I get tired of juggling new puzzle pieces or even learning about them sometimes and then having to figure out where they fit in to the whole scheme of things. So your stirrup length can change how your knee reacts. Now, nothing happens in a vacuum, fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it. So, if you go to changing your stirrup length, obviously that's going to change how you ride and what your primary grip is used and different things like that. It's totally fine. Just give yourself a grace period to let your body and your nervous system reorganize and understand how to get those movements done, because you're asking your body to do the same task a different way. And our bodies don't like that often, particularly if we have worked for years and years and years to ride a certain way. So take some time with it. It's not going to take the same amount of time, but it is going to take some time, and have a little bit of a grace period with that. Like I said, I like riding with a shorter stirrup, and on both my rope saddle and my barrel saddle. It's what's worked for me, and it allows me to really be able to maneuver my pelvis and get the reactions that I want from my horse and be in the position that I want. But as I've been riding a couple colts and a couple seasoned horses lately and just doing more work, I get in from the barn and they're just cranky. It's not the pain I'm talking about. It's a dull pain. It's just a lot. For me, I would say they're just cranky. Sometimes there's a little bit of swelling in there. Sometimes they feel just a little full, just a little bit of pressure. And, sometimes I'll get that big crepitus if I go into a deep squat and some crankiness there. But it's not, it's not anything major, right? There's no sharp shooting pain. It's not debilitating as far as walking or doing anything. But as we've talked about with chronic pain before, and we'll talk about it right now, when you just keep adding layers and layers of things on, it weighs on you psychologically, but also weighs on you physiologically, because the body can only handle so much pain. And so if it's taking a major precedence, say your knees have gotten cranky, as in my situation, and you have a day job where you have to, do a lot of walking, you are some kind of inspector, or, work in a factory, or install things where it's a highly physically demanding job. Well, it's almost like a wet blanket. around you and just kind of puts you in kind of this mud and slog and just kind of slows you down a little bit. So, what are we going to do about this? Because, if you went to somebody and often I hear people say, I've gone to several different healthcare providers before and they tell me to just quit what I'm doing. If it hurts, don't do that. Well, we know that that is not a good enough answer around here at Rider's Edge. We got to figure out what's going on. And we may have to alter things, but often we don't go by the if it hurts, don't do that. It's often a cop-out line, honestly. So, altering your stirrup length may be something you need to play with. Changing stirrups may be something you need to play with. And it may not even be the type of stirrup. You may not go from a metal stirrup to a wooden stirrup or vice versa. But you may like having a wider stirrup because if you have a wider surface in your stirrup, you will change the pressure of your foot and how you push down through the stirrups. And that may or may not give you some relief. A lot of this, unfortunately, just like training horses, is trial and error. You've got to try some different things to see what works for you. But we don't have to just turn a blind eye to chronic cranky knees. We can do something about it. What I've chosen to do about it in my situation is I've lasered my knees. I laser them a couple times a week. And you may be rolling your eyes at me at this time and going, well, hey, Farrells, that's great, but we don't all have a class 4 laser sitting in our living room. No. You can use other modalities. There's a lot of accessibility to, I've had other people say that they use the PEMF machines, the Magna Waves and those kinds of pulse machines to work on their lower leg pain. Lasers worked with it. I've had success with dry needling and things like that. But it's not enough just to treat at the knees. Like I said, the knee is a middle child. And the knee is, it's a little bit similar to a horse's lower leg. A tiny bit. So bear with me for a second. Because we don't have as long a tendons as horses do to operate their lower limbs, and that's what makes them such highly efficient animals. But there's not a lot, it's kind of out there by itself. If you poke around on your leg, even though the muscle comes down there, there's not a whole lot of muscle covering the knee. You get the tendons actually attaching below the knee to facilitate that movement. So it's similar in that way. So because of that, we've got to look at what's going on either up the chain, when I talk about chains, talk about kinetic chains. So you have an upper and lower limb kinetic chain, and within the lower limb kinetic chain, we're talking about the pelvis, the knee, and the ankle. So you may have to look at what's going on up the chain or down the chain. It may be something like, if you're talking about down the chain, you may be having some stiff ankles. Your ankles could get stiff. That happens a lot with riders because of our heels down position that we often ride in. Or even if you're one of those riders that, or ropers even, that ride with your toes pointed down. We ride for longer periods of time in kind of extreme or more on the outer ends of the spectrum of the ankle range of motion. So it may be something mechanical through your ankle, or maybe a strength thing through your ankle. If you're somebody that has had a lot of ankle problems on one side and you've turned that ankle several times, when grade school basketball or anything, I've I have one of those. And I can walk down the shed row and it go bloop. So it'll happen. Things like that add up over time. Now, I'm not telling you all this to say that you're fragile and that you need to be in a bubble. That's not it at all. Just like we talk about not putting our horses in a bubble and working through all that, we don't need to do that to ourselves either. But it could be something down in that ankle area, whether it be a stiffness thing or a weakness thing that can be putting extra stress up the chain, and it's coming out of the knee. Vice versa, it could be something above the knee, in the upper part of the chain. Because of our lifestyle, because of being truck drivers and sitting for long periods of time, to when we're driving, when we are working our day jobs to pay for our horse habits, we sit. We sit a lot of the time. Not only do we sit a lot of the time, our sport requires sitting. So our glutes, our booty muscles, they can get lazy and they can get turned off. And to be honest with you, they are a huge primary mover. They're a huge mover and shaker, pun intended, of the lower kinetic chain. And they can get dull and lazy and kind of turn off, honestly. And so it may be something as simple, I'm using air quotes right now, but something as simple as turning your glute muscles on to where they're firing correctly or firing quicker, to allow your body to kind of be pushed through space with your glutes versus being pulled through space with your quads. So how do you do that? You squeeze your butt muscles together. It gets tricky. You've got to be able to squeeze them together without squeezing your hammies and everything tightly through there. It's a very finite movement. It's a very finesse-filled movement that takes some brain power, if that's something you have to work through to get turned back on. It's one of my top 3 most frustrating things to teach clients to do, but it's so foundational. And we don't use it enough. We don't use our glutes enough. Often when we're riding, for example, one place where you should use your glutes a lot is if you post at the trot. And that movement should be your glutes pushing you forward in your saddle versus you being pulled forward in your saddle. So there's a lot to be said for getting that fired up. And it may be weakness in your glutes. It may be on the front side of that. It may be tight hips. Again, because we sit all the time, our hip flexors are shortened. And so it may be tight hips that are causing an imbalance in what's going on. So there are a lot of different reasons that you can be having cranky knees. But you don't have to live with them. Working with a therapist, working with a professional who can assess what's going on for you and give you a correct diagnosis is very helpful towards your knee health, towards longevity of knees. Because even though you're in your 30s or 40s, and that might be a little bit cranky, you may have a couple of days in a row and then you don't notice it for a long time and you say, oh, my knees are fine, and when it comes down to it, I'll just get them replaced. That can happen. There's been great strides happen in joint replacement surgeries, but no matter how many strides they continue to make in those surgeries, you're still taking a joint out of the body and replacing it. and it's a difficult rehab. It's a long process. It's a highly successful process, but it's a long process. And you can still ride if you get the correct implant, whether we're talking about hips or knees. But, you're honestly looking at a year before you really feel like, quote unquote, back to normal. Now, it doesn't take, you're looking at 6 to 8 months before you're getting released to do things that you want to do. But as we know, getting released from rehab and what non-equestrians do, and getting released from rehab and then get ready to be competitive at our sport are two different things. It's almost like a whole second phase of rehab needs to happen. We get through the normal rehab that is for mere mortals, and then we'll go do this other rehab. But to really be at an advantage for yourself and for your horse. Because our horses feel when we're off, I mean, they can feel a fly land on their back, for goodness sakes. They know when we're off and not feeling it, not feeling good. And slight changes can change your riding and your reaction time and do all of the above. So working with somebody who understands anatomy, understands your sport, is highly advantageous, particularly in this situation. Because a lot of times, if you just work with a personal trainer, you go to a gym, they're not as trained a lot of times in anatomy as, say, a physical therapist. And sometimes could be detrimental to your goal if they're not really looking at breaking down how your body moves and how your body organizes its pathway to move, and just giving you a set of exercises because you came in and you said, hey, I want to be better at riding, my core is really weak, or I want to have nicer looking legs, can you help me? They can. They're very good. They're very good at giving out exercise programs, but sometimes it takes a little bit more. It takes a little bit deeper dive into what's going on and using a combination of things. For me, how I'm addressing this continued crankiness, not only am I addressing it locally at the problem with the laser, but I'm working through exercises. And am I doing a crazy amount of exercises every day? No, I am working on the basics. And then throughout the day, I will cue. So if we're talking about the glute sets, so if I'm sitting at a red light, I'll sit there and do, however many glute sets it takes for that red light to change. Or if I know I'm going to bend over and pick up that bucket off the ground, I'll make sure and engage both my glutes and my core so that they have a chance of writing that pathway correctly, and improving how they recruit muscles and in what order and how that works. Because if you can flip the script that way, then you can take some pressure off of your knees. So kind of a twofold way of addressing that. Again, this podcast is meant to be educational, and I highly urge you to work with a physical therapist if you're looking at a chronic cranky knee. I'll be more than happy to help you here at Rider's Edge, because I live it every day too. I'm out there. I say I'm out there. I pulled in the barn tonight to ride. I hurried home from work and got changed and got to the barn. As soon as I pulled in the driveway, it started raining again. So, and we had the only rain in the county the other day that ended up completely flooding out the arena. It was nuts. So we're in kind of stormy afternoon, summertime, stormy season here. So it just continues to add to that 12 inches of rain every 3 days. Yay! Yay for us. So, look into having somebody help you, because you can do little things that can make a big difference. And that can make a big difference 10 years down the road, 15, 20, 20 plus, and you will save yourself a lot of time, a lot of financial burden, and just be able to continue on with what God gave you and your joints without having to get them replaced. Now, I'm not anti-surgery by any means. Surgery has its place, and I'm so thankful that we live in a time that we have options in our health care and medical care, no matter how broken our system is. But there are a lot of things that you can do, and just little things every day that you can do that will pay off dividends later to prevent or postpone chronic pain in the knees. So I hope you enjoyed this podcast. If you have, please share it out. If you have somebody who would really benefit from this information, please get it to them. The more we can help each other, the better both our health and our horse's health will be. So thank you for tuning in, and as always, I will see you down the road. Thank you for listening to Rider's Edge Podcast. For show notes and other thoughts, head over to ridersedgetherapy.com. If you would like to stay connected and continue the conversation, head over to my free Facebook group, Rider's Edge Health and Wellness for Horse and Rider. Thanks for continuing the conversation, and as always, I will see you down the road.